Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. And here's Alan Mosley.
Thank you so much. What is this, episode 14?
14.
14. Holy crap.
Yeah. We're getting there.
We're getting there, that's right.
Wherever there is.
Welcome back to the Gold Standard.
Yes.
I am your host, Alan Mosley. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so. Get me on Twitter, which is at Alan M. Mosley. Facebook is facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley. And really, you should just go to our website. We do this every week. It's thegoldstandardpodcast.com. So with that in mind, we have got a really, really great show for this week.
Exciting.
Anybody that's been watching the news for 5 seconds, now that we've moved on from Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg, their 15 minutes are up. Now we're on to war with Syria, because if you haven't had enough Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and Yemen and everywhere else, now we're ready to up the ante in Syria. So a perfect guest for that today. He is the host of the Scott Horton Show, which is scotthorton.org, by the way, the author of Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, the managing director of the Libertarian Institute, which is libertarianinstitute.org, and the opinion editor of antiwar.com. And if you need me to read the URL to antiwar.com, you're really missing something. Scott Horton is on the show today.
There
Scott,
he is,
how are you
ladies and
doing, buddy?
gentlemen.
I'm doing great. Thanks, Alan, very much.
I already told you we're going to start early with the meme of the week, but before I do that, where's the beard, man?
Oh, the thing is, I'm no good at trimming it, so I grow it till it's too long, and then I just shave it off, and I grow it out and shave it off.
So it's just a zero-sum game for you.
My haircuts. I groom myself usually, once every 6 months or so.
Okay, I got you. Well, I won't give you any more of a hard time for that. But we're gonna jump really quick.
Still clean shave anymore here.
I
forgot I didn't know I was doing video today. I might have shaved for you.
Yeah, that's what it is. Well, you know what? Are you the type of guy that when the beard comes off, you look like 15 years younger?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, my wife hates it. Shave.
There you go. Well, we're going to start off right off the bat with everyone's favorite segment of the show, which is the meme of the week. We got to do the meme of the week because this is going to be a serious show, and it can't be all serious, right? So right off the bat, Justin Amash says, Congress hasn't authorized war against Syria. Unless President Obama expects imminent attack on U.S., use of force is unconstitutional and illegal. And then, some years later, Justin Amash says, Congress hasn't authorized war against Syria. Unless President Trump expects imminent attack on U.S., use of force is unconstitutional and illegal. And for a really hot take on political commentary, Scott Horton says, well, how quaint.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, I'm not sorry at all, because I laughed when I saw that, and I have a hunch that you and I share some similar views on just how far the magical fairy dust of the Constitution is going to get us when it comes to war criminals.
Yeah, the thing of it is, I want to see revolution and the government completely overthrown and obliterated, but then I prefer the rule of law, as long as we still have it. There's something like rule of law, kept up pretension of a rule of law, compared to what we have now, where the Constitution, it is still the Constitution. It still grants these, by the agreement of 3/4 of the states back then, I guess, it still grants this national government the authority to exist. But then that's pretty much all it says. Congress and the president and the court, they can exist and they can do what they want to you. It's basically all the Constitution says at this point. And so, but no, I'd rather keep the Bill of Rights, keep Article 1, Section 9, and keep the places where the power is supposed to be divided, even as they taught me as a kid in school, because the guys who wrote this Constitution, many of them were veterans of the war against the tyranny of the British, and they didn't want to just replicate that. So they wanted to have all these checks of power, separations of balance, checks, balance, and separation of power, so that ambition would check ambition, so we could stay free while they fight amongst each other.
Well,
I guess the Constitution ain't perfect, but it's better than this. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, we don't take a super hardline, argumentative approach from the perspective of the Constitution on this show, just because I mean, where has that gotten us so far? But we did just have Mike Meharry of the 10th Amendment Center last week, who, obviously their position is, we got to get as local as we can. We can't just divorce ourselves from the whole process, because then you find out really quick you don't have a voice at all. And we'll get a little bit into that as the show goes on. But I want to start off with the first bit about you. So I've got the link here pulled up for our viewers to see. This is scotthorton.org, which is the website for you for the Scott Horton Show. So how long have you been doing the radio/podcast scene, and how has that evolved over the years as hopefully the liberty movement has moved and grown and getting the message out there?
Well, I started my first radio show in the very end of 1998, I think, on Free Radio Austin, which was a little community pirate radio station, mostly leftists and environmentalists and stuff like that. White kids with dreadlocks, good kids, yeah. And so I was on there for a while, and then after that I was on Chaos Radio. I started on Chaos Radio in 2002, another pirate station here in town. It was mostly metal and punk rock and drinking beer and having fun station. I had the political show on there, and then it's gone through different incarnations basically since then. But in 2003 is when I started doing regular interviews. And I'd done a couple of interviews before that on my previous shows, but in 2003 I started the weekend interview show, and so that was 15 years ago. It was April 12th, 2003 was the first one. So right as Baghdad had fallen 3 days before, and it was Alan Bach from antiwar.com was the first guy that I interviewed there. And so since then it's been 4,600 something interviews, almost all on foreign policy.
Well, we're up to 14, so it's basically the same thing. Pretty much in the same ballpark, yeah.
Yeah, you guys are kicking ass.
Thanks, man.
Well,
I'm just that's all.
Yeah. Well, I've been exposed to you from a lot of different programs. A few weeks ago, we had Mance Raider on the show, who I know is a big fan of yours, and you've had a number of appearances with him. I think most recently, you guys were actually talked about the Oklahoma City bombing, which is not the typical Afghanistan or Iraq type segment, but was really good. Everybody needs to check that out. Mance Raider's fantastic. He's a friend of ours. Now, the most recent work of yours that I've been the happiest with, and I got the audiobook and I listened to it. I did make my way through 9 hours of Scott Horton, and I did enjoy it. I've got the Amazon link up here. Fool's Errand: Time to End the War in Afghanistan, which is available. So is that Kindle, paperback, and audiobook?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to give you a chance to take a few minutes to talk us through writing the book. What really motivated you to write this particular topic, and then I want to comment a little bit with you about my impressions. I'll say right off the bat before you get into the weeds of it, the part of the book now having finished it and a week or two removed of having had some time to kind of roll it around in my head, re-listen to a few parts. The areas of the book where you were going over some of the tortures that were happening to the innocent or not, which borderline is irrelevant, over there. And then, of course, when you see things in the news most recently about people like the potential appointments of people like Gina Haspel, it struck a chord with me, man. Like it's one of those things where I'm listening to you detail these accounts, and I'm just like, how is there not more of an outcry, or how are there not more people involved that see these things that are thinking this can't be the right way? Like, this isn't who we are, right? Like, so take us through that a little bit.
Yeah, the torture chapter, if you want to talk about that part first, I guess, it's almost an aside in a way. I mean, it's a part of the narrative. It's a big part of what drove the motivation of the insurgents against the occupation along. But then, once I started writing that chapter, I kind of was worried about it. It's one of the longest chapters in the book. And once you start talking about torture, well, you have to talk about the CIA black sites. You have to talk about Bagram and military torture. And you got to talk about Abu Ghraib in a way. The Iraq stuff has to be in there just a little bit. It's the book about Afghanistan, but then there's the extraordinary rendition program, and there's the history, there's the way that they manipulated the law to make it seem like this was okay to do, and all these things. And it's hard to write just one chapter without just the torture chapter turning it. And in fact, the whole Afghanistan book started as a chapter. And I was trying to write a book about the whole war on terrorism. And I was still on chapter 1, which is chapter 1 in this book, getting into this mess about how this is all Jimmy Carter's fault through Bill Clinton, basically. And then right around then, and even chapter 1 was way too long to be chapter 1 of a book about all the different wars. It was supposed to try to be really brief about each one. And then once I started writing about Afghanistan, it got completely out of control. 20,000 words really quickly, and then 30 and 40, and it ended up being 55,000 words or something in. And I just went ahead and decided, I guess I'll put out a book about Afghanistan. In fact, Andrew Bacevich put out this book, America's War for the Greater Middle East, where he did a year before me what I was trying to do, which was sort of write up a summary of each of these terror wars, starting with Carter, but then especially, post-September 11th stuff. And so figured, I had the story that I already wanted to tell about Afghanistan, because I've covered it all this time. I've had all, my different, great sources that I've interviewed on my show all of this time to learn all about it. So, what I did was I basically wrote the first kind of rough draft, and then I stopped and read about 20 books about it and took a ton of notes and went back and corrected myself and filled in some gaps and improved upon it, basically, and then edited it 1 billion times, and then put it out there. So, that's where the book came from. It was actually supposed to just be chapter 2. And, I was thinking, even when I was just starting to write it, we're spending a lot of time in Afghanistan before we get to the real exciting part, which is Iraq War II and all the stuff that you really came for if you want to learn all about the terror wars. And so I think it was a good thing that I decided to just put it out as a standalone, because I think if it had been chapter 2 of a book about wars, you might not have even ever got to Iraq. When you're stuck way on the far side of Persia, you narrate it from where you're waiting to get to. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, it's a great book. I enjoyed reading it, although it's a tough subject. It's an important work. Let me ask you this, something, because it's one of those things where I've never taken the plunge to do an undertaking like that, to write a book that's expanded on any type of topic, current or historic or otherwise. So a question I have is that when did the book officially get originally released on, say, paperback, and then
last August?
So are there any major developments on the Afghan front that have happened since the book was released that you think is really worthy of mention?
Actually, no, I had really good timing with that, because I was waiting. I kept putting off publication of the book, and it's good because I found 10 million editing errors in the meantime, so that was convenient. But I was waiting for Trump to make his decision, and part of the end of the book, as you know, is about the politics of the Trump administration, how he had convinced himself, quite rightly, that the Afghan war was stupid and that Obama was stupid for expanding it. Obama was right to insist on drawing down the troop numbers from the surge over the generals' dead bodies, as he did, and that he wanted to end the war. And it took a good 8 months, 7 months, for McMaster and Mattis and the rest of them to roll him into this thing. They had to get rid of Bannon first and get him to escalate the war, which he really didn't want to do, just because it's so obvious the foolish mission to try to pacify the Pashtuns of Afghanistan. It's just never going to happen. And there were quotes of him saying, Alexander couldn't do it, the British couldn't do it, the Soviets couldn't do it, why should we do it? Which is, of course, the exact right question, right? How does that make sense? But anyway, I was waiting, and he kept delaying the decision. I had a Pentagon source that told me that they were supposed to announce the new troop escalation in early February, and one of the generals, I think it was Nicholson, actually sabotaged himself. He's in charge of the Afghan war now. Sabotaged himself by going straight to John McCain's Senate committee and testifying on C-SPAN that, yeah, we definitely need at least 3,000 to 5,000 more troops, basically trying to sandbag Trump the same way that they did with Obama, just rolling him into it. And I think that was actually counterproductive for their goals. He might have gone along with that if they had just brought it straight to him, but he took that kind of as an insult, and so he fought with them, delayed it. And so, but anyway, I'm sorry to answer your question. You know, my argument in the book is that basically in the post-surge era, so from 2012, 13 through now, we basically have a status quo situation where the Taliban control about half the country. They don't seize the provincial capitals because that would provoke too much of a reaction against them, but they rule the whole countryside of the Pashtun areas. And the Kabul government has just about as much reach as it did before, and not more than that, and it's not growing. And, to whatever degree they claim to be professionalizing the army, they still have the highest attrition rates ever in this country. So, basically I don't expect any major changes. Trump's major change was going ahead and announcing the escalation. That was a really good place to end the book, because I expect for the status quo to more or less hold. The Taliban aren't going to march on Kabul. That would be a suicide mission. They're not interested in that. I think, and the Afghan government is not going to be anywhere near a situation where they're going to defeat the Taliban, or even really be, as they put it, in a stronger position to negotiate in the future. That's just not in the cards. So I think, as horrible as it's, because it is, it means mass death. I think the status quo is going to hold.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good time to to segue this just a little bit into some current events of the last week or so, and you see a lot of people firing off on Twitter. So you were kind of putting off the publication date of your book because you were playing a little bit of a wait and see with the Trump administration. We always can cross our fingers.
I actually, what's funny? I jumped the gun and I went ahead and said, screw it, and I went ahead and published the book, predicting that Trump is going to do this and he's going to do that, obviously.
Yeah.
And then 5 days later, he went ahead and made the announcement. So when he got the very first edition of the book, collector's edition, where I'm still predicting the Trump surge, and then I went ahead and went nuts, and I had to go back and update the last chapter. I basically just had to change future tense to past tense, and then I turned it back in again.
Well, if anything, it's kind of a sad thing that's all it was, though, is that you pretty much already figured that, there's going to be a troop escalation in Afghanistan.
Yeah, so it was clear. I just couldn't exactly predict when it was going to be, because he kept kicking the can down the road, and it was driving me crazy.
Yeah.
And I was saying, you know what, Obama put it off until he finally gave in at the end of November.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I'll go ahead. And then but I should have known. As soon as I got rid of Bannon, and it was like almost as soon as I published the book, they announced that Trump's going to Camp David with all his generals. Yeah, they are all going to corner him, isolated out there in the woods, and read him the riot act and tell him these are your marching orders, and he's going to say, "Sir, yes, sir." And that's exactly the way it went.
So like to tie this into some of the current news, so you see a lot of people talking about, commentator / candidate Trump versus President Trump, and there's all the tweets of him saying, the Middle East is a quagmire. You don't go into Syria. That's going to be a waste of lives and money. And of course, it's easy to criticize the Obama administration with those words. And then of course, here we are, a couple of years into the administration, and we're cruise missiling Damascus and so on. And I don't believe for a second that that's going to be the end of that story either. So give us a little bit of a primer if you've done much research on the current events on where we are in Syria and what the narrative that I keep hearing from people in our circles is that this is a proxy war type situation. So and we're flying air sorties that are to the benefit of ISIS in Syria. So how did we get from a candidate Trump who was completely correct in saying that's nothing that we belong in, this is going to be a waste of time and money, to the President Trump who is now shelling Damascus because of what may or may not be false flags with chemical weapons and whatnot. So I mean, so what happened? Give us a few minutes of how did we get here in Syria?
Okay, sure. So first of all, about Trump, he's no Ron Paul or libertarian or anything
Sure.
like that. He's basically just a cranky old guy who watches Fox News and goes golfing. So, but, in 2018, any cranky old man who watches Fox News and goes golfing could tell you, I'm sick and tired of this war. And just without being necessarily good on it, right? But just hating it by now, being tired of it by now, thinking that there must be an end in sight. It just doesn't seem right, to have this, spending all the money that we're spending, as Trump likes to emphasize. But so what he campaigned on was not non-intervention, right? What he campaigned on was escalating the war on terrorism against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And not just killing them, but committing crimes against them and reinstituting torture and killing their sisters and doing whatever. And he said, even if torturing them doesn't get good intelligence, I don't care. They deserve it anyway. We should just torture them for fun and for punishment and just to prove how macho we are and this kind of thing. So, but what he ran against was overthrowing these secular dictators like Saddam and Saleh and Gaddafi and Assad, when all that does is create more breeding ground for these terrorists. So again, that's not a Ron Paulian position, which is, pure as the driven snow. That's a simple kind of right-wing nationalist position that, well, wait a minute, who exactly is our priority here? There's a group of guys, what knocked our towers down, and then there's other powers. So let's discriminate and start figuring out who's who and who's doing. And so, now, what Trump has done, well, get back to the attack on the Assad regime in a second. For the most part, I think it's fair to say that, well, I'll talk there right now. These missile strikes do not seem to represent a change in Trump's policy back to the Obama policy of targeting Assad. Now, even Obama was afraid to really do a regime change, right? He could have called out the B-52s and bombed the Syrian Arab army to the Marines and directly installed Ayman al-Zawahiri or Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, leader of al-Qaeda in Syria, on the throne in Damascus. He didn't dare, right? So instead, they had the Israelis called the policy of letting both sides continue to hemorrhage to death. Just let them keep fighting, help them keep fighting and bleed both sides. But Trump said, no, forget that. And he called off the CIA support for the jihadists there. Of course, Obama's support for the jihadists, sorry to jump around in time, it's hard, but it's a complicated mess.
Sure.
Support for the jihadists in the first place led to the rise of the Islamic State, who conquered the East. They're basically a break-off. It's Al-Qaeda in Iraq. That's what the Islamic State is. It's the Iraqi-dominated faction of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Whereas the Al-Nusra Front is the Syrian-dominated faction of Al-Qaeda in Iraq from Iraq War II. So when ISIS in 2013 broke off from Al-Qaeda and stopped doing what Zawahiri said, started doing what Baghdadi said instead, they seized eastern Syria, and then in June of 2014, they seized all of western Iraq. Now, that was never planned, at least as far as the Americans are concerned. I don't know about the Saudis and the Turks, but for the Americans, this was, oh my God, the worst blowback ever from supporting the al-Nusra types in the Syrian war. Just as Patrick Coburn had warned, and just as so many had warned, that Western Iraq was, in fact, the DIA report of August 2012 under Mike Flynn had warned this is what could happen. He said it's a danger that Western Iraq could. So then Obama launched Iraq War III from August 2014 through last fall in order to defeat the Islamic State in Western Iraq, Fallujah, Ramadi, and Mosul especially, and force those guys back out again. And so then, and then also that's extended to eastern Syria as well, where America has backed the Syrian Kurds as their proxy force to roust the Islamic State out of Raqqa there in eastern Syria. So this has ended up in a situation where the Assad government basically has won the war. Trump backed off, really called off the support for the jihadis. He finished bombing the hell out of ISIS, as he said he was going to do. And so now you look at what's happened just in the recent past. Trump has said that we're only in Syria to fight ISIS. And as soon as we're completely done with that mopping up exercise and everything, then we're gone. And Rex Tillerson, this was in February, and Rex Tillerson said, no, that's wrong. Belay that order. We're here to fight and to contain the influence of Iran and Hezbollah, and of course backed by Russia and the Assad government, the sovereign government of the state. And when Rex Tillerson announced that, our NATO allies, the Turks, said to Vladimir Putin in Russia, see that? They say outright now they're here to stay for us, and that means they're backing the Kurds, and they're going to solidify their backing of the Kurds there in northeastern Syria. And so we want to attack. And Putin, of course, seeing the opportunity to pit two NATO allies against each other, says, all right, then, and pulls back his air cover, and the Turks invade northern Syria, crush the Kurds at Afrin, and start moving on Manbij, where the Americans are embedded with the Syrian Kurds in the name of limiting the power of Iran, who are only there to fight against the al-Qaeda fighters that our government supported in the first place. And now we're nose to nose in a border dispute with our NATO allies, the Turks. We're hell-bent on limiting the power of these Syrian Kurds. And so then Donald Trump says again, I want to get out of Syria. We beat ISIS. They're gone and soon leaving. And the next thing you know, there's a gas attack. And the next thing you know, all the allies and all the Democrats and all the generals, all the spies and all the wonks, all of Twitter say we got to do something and this and that, and completely go for the same scam that they've already tried twice before. Once with an outright false flag in 2013, and another with an obvious hoax that they misconstrued an attack on a building as a gas attack in Khan Shaykhun a year ago. And here they are trying the same scam again. And apparently the whole narrative is already falling apart about what happened here. It may not have even been a gas attack at all, although I'm not certain of that. But that was enough, really, basically, to trigger this thing. And so, I'm sorry, let me wrap up this point real quick here. The bottom line is this. Al-Qaeda is only the enemy of the American people because our government, helped back them in the first place and then betrayed them and provoked them into turning against the American people, bombing Iraq from bases in Saudi and supporting Israel and all of this stuff. But so they're the only enemies of the American people. But they're basically the very right-wing radicals of the countries that our government supports, right? None of the 9/11 hijackers came from the axis of evil states of Iran, Iraq, and Syria. They all came not from countries that were the enemy countries of our government, but from the countries that our government was too close friends with. That's why they hated us so much. We supported their dictator, whose policy they hated, Mubarak and King Fahd, and all of that. So that's what got us into this mess. But they shed the blood of innocent American civilians. Right? But so that doesn't really change the situation in the Middle East, where to the American empire, which maintains this position of dominance in the Middle East, the problem is not Saudi Arabians and Egyptian hijackers. The problem is Iran, Persia, which is independent from the American empire and who are the prime beneficiaries of Iraq War II. Oops. And so now everything that our government does is trying to make up for the fact that George Bush got rid of Saddam for the Ayatollahs. And now, so that means America's government has put itself on the side of the al-Qaeda fighters of the region against the Shiite power, because that's who they hate, even though al-Qaeda fighters are loyal to Ayman al-Zawahiri, butcher of New York City, the actual enemy of the people of the United States of America.
Well, I want to touch. I know Blake over here is just like he's hyperventilating from all the information you just threw at him. No, it's all right.
No, it's awesome.
Sometimes.
No, it's good. I mean, this is why we want to have you on, because speaking for myself, because I'm just the voice of the people and all that. I think something that frustrates me, that I know frustrates a lot of people, you had mentioned the false flag incidents and the most recent gas attack, which that's just falling apart by the minute. I think what frustrates people is we seem to be in this never-ending cycle of there being some sort of false flag, some kind of a hoax, or if you're really giving people the benefit of the doubt, we'll say that it seemed appropriate at the time, but they jumped the gun on their information. And then troops are sent somewhere, strikes happen, just like this past week in Damascus, and then we find out down the road, absolutely, verifiably that was a hoax or that was incomplete information. And then we do it again, then we do it again, then we do it again. Another false flag, another strike built on nothing, another false flag, another strike built on nothing. But I think what frustrates people, beyond the fact that happens and beyond the fact that just seems to be like we're just in a yearly routine now, that goes on and on and on. I think what really frustrates people is, once it is proven to be nonsense, no one ever has to answer for their mistakes, right? Like we'll do it again and we'll do it again. And everybody that had their MAGA hats on thought Hillary Clinton was going to jail. I hate to inform you, friends, Obama's not going to jail. Hillary Clinton's not going to jail. Donald Trump's not going to jail. I don't know where you people think you're getting this from. So, I mean, what do you speak to people like? And I know you do some speaking. I know you've gone to some LP conventions here lately. What do you say to a group of people that they're just angry, they're just frustrated because it feels like that people can just act with impunity, and then when 18 months later we find out it's all BS, they say, oh well, and they wipe their hands of it and move on to the next intervention? I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, for me, I just don't ever believe them. I give them no benefit of the doubt, and turns out most of the time I'm right. I don't feel a need to immediately cite every piece of information that seems to confirm my bias. I got patience to wait and see, just like people who are always making the hawkish claims never do. And it seems like people would catch on when they've lied about every single excuse to get American people into war since 1812. I just did a list for antiwar.com.
It's funny that I was just going to tell you real quick.
All of them.
Yeah.
And I got at least one little link about how the situation was misrepresented. From Remember, from 1812 through Remember the Maine and Pearl Harbor, and the Taliban's supposed refusal to negotiate over bin Laden and Saddam's weapons, and the rest of this stuff. So, I don't know what it's going to take to get people to stop believing in it. I mean, seriously, isn't that your first clue on the Russiagate thing that's not true? Is that it's about Russia?
Yeah.
I mean, America is the world empire. America is the most corrupt civilization on the planet. America is the greatest purveyor of violence. Every horrible thing that Vladimir Putin does, like back the Donbass resistance against the fascist regime the Americans installed in Kiev, or back the Assad government against the Al-Qaeda fighters that Obama supported against them, is simply a reaction to America's horrible foreign policy. George Kennan, who invented the containment doctrine, is the guy who warned Bill Clinton, don't expand NATO. I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen, he said. You expand America's military alliance in Eastern Europe to the point where the Russians react, and then you can say, see, Russian aggression, that's why we need this defensive alliance to keep containing them. But the fact is that the Soviet Union is dead and gone. There were people who said back then, oh no, end of the Soviet Union must be some kind of scam. You can't trust the Russians. Pat Buchanan was saying, no, they pulled their army back behind the Ural Mountains. It's over. They're gone. It's done. Why in the world would we pick a fight with the people who overthrew communism for us?
Yeah.
For God's sake, it's crazy. So the fact that, boo-hoo, Putin supposedly did this or that, come on. Yeah. America did all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're
the government outright, overthrew the government in Kiev twice in 10 years.
Yeah, well, you kind of remind me there, because we had mentioned Ron Paul really briefly earlier. I'll never forget a comment that he had made back during his presidential run days, where members of the press would attack Paul and say, well, you attract all these kind of tinfoil hat conspiracy types, and all these different cranks and whatnot are drawn to your message, therefore you must be illegitimate. And I always felt like he gave a really poignant answer, which was, well, not to speak to any particular person's political theory, but I think I think when the government proves to lie so much, when they're always so loose with the truth when it comes to any of these issues, just like we're seeing today, that invites conspiracy, right? Like when you know that they can't be trusted, and like what you had just said, that you don't ever give them the benefit of the doubt because they're always so bad on everything. Then,
well, and their claims are exactly, the definition of conspiracy thinking, right?
Sure.
Which is, I mean, don't get me wrong, because there's such things as real conspiracies and important revisionist history. I don't mean to completely discredit that.
Yeah.
But when people are mocking conspiracy thinking, what they're really talking about is people who are just speculating and jumping to crazy conclusions. But that's exactly what the War Party on Washington, D.C. and CNN do all day long. I'm sure Ron must have answered a few times that, hey, all these people who like me that you seem to demonize so much, at least they all opposed the war that you guys sold. You guys said there was an axis of evil. Get this, a conspiracy between Osama bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, the Ayatollah, and Kim Jong-il. And they're the axis, right? Get it? Like Hitler and Mussolini and Tojo. Yeah, they're the axis powers coming to kill you. What a bunch of crap. What a bunch of trutherism. Ooh, did you hear the one where the Israelis claimed that they saw Iraqi intelligence flask of anthrax to Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker, in a cafe in Prague? And get this, Czechoslovakia, which hadn't existed for more than a decade by the time that this supposedly took place, but that was Cheney's claim anyway.
Yeah, well, it's like, the axis of evil specifically. Like that's such a cartoon caricature of what you would think like a fantasy movie would paint as how World War III is going to go down.
Syria. They pretend that it's not America and Turkey and Saudi and Israel and Qatar and all of our allies who have created al-Nusra and ISIS there. In their conspiracy, no, all the real rebels are a bunch of moderates. They're great. The only reason that there's bad guys is because of Assad. It's Assad that created ISIS. See, when he gave in to the protesters' demands and released all these guys from jail. Oh, yeah, no, that was all just a big conspiracy so that there would be religious right-wingers so that he could smear the wonderful moderate opposition as a bunch of religious right-wingers. When it's just made up. It's just a bunch of crap. It's just exactly the kind of thing that you could find on a tinfoil hat site if they were from another country and America wasn't their target, but they wanted to, same as, demonizing Saddam Hussein. I mean, can you imagine, think back now and look at 2003 and imagine the conspiracy theory that Saddam Hussein, the Ba'athist regime in Iraq that barely controlled, 40% of the country at the time, of their own country at the time, was such a dire threat to America. We have to attack them right now. And that there's no point in even trying to send a negotiator to deal with them. Here's footage of our Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, shaking hands with Donald Rumsfeld. But the idea that we could possibly send Rumsfeld back there to read Hussein the Riot Act and his writ, and that if you want to come in from the cold, you're going to cooperate with us, absolutely impossible. Don't consider it for a minute. Negotiate. We must have this war. I mean, that is insane. It's so ridiculous. That's like saying we have to have a war against you because of the threat that you pose to civilization. It's just stupid and wrong and not true. And on its face, it's not true unless people just are caught up in it and to believe in it. And there's only one superpower, and it ain't in Mesopotamia. Oh, I mean, it is there, but it's based out of here.
Yeah. Well, we talk about like smashing sacred cows, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that can be good on various civil liberties or individualism or what have you, but their sacred cow might be the military, that you got to support the troops and you got to back our guys no matter what. The same people who would not believe or be willing to follow some random BS statistic about something to do with, economic policy or what have you. The same people that are skeptical of everything in Washington will turn around and believe every single thing the media tells them if it pertains to foreign policy, because that's defense and that's life and death. And so I hate to keep on hearkening back to Ron Paul. Actually, no, I don't hate to do that. But I'll always remember the comments that he had made about that how do these people get through their day, right? Like how do people just fritter day and night worrying about the scary Iranian that's going to be under their bed that's going to kill them in their sleep? When, I mean, that's just never been the case, right? Like, talk is cheap, and I'm not going to sit here and say that there aren't some unsavory dictators in the world, but those people don't rise to their position of powers by being madmen and illogical and nuts and their actions having no logical coherency. They get to where they are more often than not, yeah, maybe by being brutal, but oftentimes by being smart. And so for us to just believe that someone like Assad, who is on his way to defeating the rebels being a cute word for, ISIS, that he's on his way to winning the war and to reestablishing his sovereignty in Syria, that he would just decide one day, literally there's a parade in the street of people happy for his victories, and then for him to decide, I'm going to drop a bunch of chlorine gas on these guys. That'll really show them. Like, that just, I don't know how anyone in their right mind can believe that nonsense and think that someone that's that stupid could ever become the dictator of a country, right? Like, that just doesn't follow.
Right. I mean, and in fact, he's the ophthalmologist and never really wanted to be a dictator. That was his older brother's job, but his older brother died in a car wreck. So he is sort of a little bit bumbling and a little bit, not exactly in the right place. But yeah, you're still right, though. There's no indication that he's, any kind of either insane maniac or completely super. Now, there is, an actor-agent problem there where it's possible that somebody made a bad decision that was not his decision at all. I can't completely rule that out. I sure don't believe it until I see proof beyond a shadow of a doubt. And look where the proof comes from. The claims of Jaish al-Islam, it's nothing but a carbon copy of bin Laden's group on Misra there.
Well, that, and that also, that kind of comes back to just the foreign policy fiasco being what it is, that how do you expect dictators in foreign countries, aggressive or otherwise, how do you expect them to react to American foreign policy when, chemical weapons inspectors are on their way to the country to check things out, but we've already shot missiles at them. So we've already bombed them, so we've already indicted them for being literally Hitler, as they say. So if we're willing to drop the bombs before the inspectors even check out the scene, then why would they bother working with inspectors, right? Why would they bother ever playing ball with American policy? Because they know that, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Right. Well, and speaking of which, look who's our new national security advisor.
Oh.
John Bolton's greatest enemies in the world are the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the International Atomic Energy Agency's safeguards agreements that they have with these so-called rogue states. As long as Iran is within the NPT, is within their safeguards agreement and within the JCPOA, then how do you pretend they're making nuclear bombs and that you have to start a war against them? And so, this is his motivation for helping Dick Cheney to drive North Korea out of the NPT back in 2002, is so they have an excuse to attack him. But then they got so bogged down on his other mission in Iraq that they weren't able to do that. So what do? They only succeeded in pushing the North Koreans directly into possessing nuclear weapons. And Bolton is on the record saying repeatedly that this is what he was trying to do with Bush's foreign policy in Iran, was get them to throw their hands up and say, fine, compliance isn't good enough, then we'll stop complying.
Scott, we actually have a recurring segment on the show that we're not doing this week called Jeff Sessions Sucks, where we'll say something terrible because we all love Jeff Sessions so much. But I actually didn't have John Bolton in the stack to discuss today, and the only reason I didn't was because he is quickly becoming like a close second place behind Jeff Sessions of people I don't like. And we could do a whole episode on how Jeff Bolton is just like swamp monster number one, and yet you still have people talking about draining the swamp. But we're starting to get a little bit of short on time, so I want to make sure we get to some of the other juicy stuff. So I've pulled up the link here for everybody to see, libertarianinstitute.org. So you are the managing director of Libertarian Institute. So give us like a few minute little bit of an overview of what's the mission statement of Libertarian Institute and where is it going in the coming months and years.
All right, well, so it started out with me and Sheldon Richman and William Norman Grigg. And, of course, I'm sad to say that Will died a year ago. So that took a little bit of the magic out of the thing, because Sheldon is known as, I think people take this wrong, as a left libertarian. I mean, he wrote a book on homeschool, guns, and income tax, so it's not like he's some commie, but he just thinks that libertarianism is a left-wing phenomenon of the perfection of real liberalism rather than any kind of conservatism. So he has that kind of reputation as sort of he's 1960s Rothbard instead of 1990s Rothbard. But William Norman Grigg then was the former John Bircher, who then became, the greatest journalist on covering the plight of the falsely convicted and people who are victims of police shootings and raids and this kind of thing, getting innocent people sprung from prison when they didn't do it because of his journalism. He's just the world's greatest hero. And so that was like the cool little thing at the beginning. And then unfortunately Will died, but we're still plugging on. We got a great bunch of writers there. I don't want to start naming names because I'll forget somebody and screw it, but we've got a few good podcasters. We've got a great stable of writers, bloggers there, and we're just doing the best to define libertarianism our way, in my way, the most plumb line sense, anti-everything all the time, no exceptions, no compromises, and of course with special focus on foreign policy, because I really don't care about anything else. I need the other writers to pick up my slack when it comes to all the other issues. My point of view is I agree with Walter Block that libertarianism is really very separate from the left and the right, that it's a whole third leg on the stool, as he says, that to me the right and the left are all deviations from pure crystalline libertarianism the way I conceive it. So I think there's a lot to accuse, and that means that there's a lot of hope for the left and the right too, since at their roots they do have a lot of views in common with us, even though they're horribly inconsistent on how they apply them all. So anyway, well, that's kind of our thing.
Again, for everybody at home, it's libertarianinstitute.org, and I mean, I'm just looking at the front page here, and then you've got Mance Rader, you've got Eric Schuler, Jim Bovard, Michael Bolden, Jeff Dice, Sheldon Richmond. I mean, you're just chock full of articles on a daily basis from heavy hitters in the liberty movement. So people need to make sure that they're going and clicking on that support link right there to help out the Libertarian Institute. And now we want to also touch on antiwar.com, and I was going to joke with you real quick. So you're the opinion editor of antiwar.com. So you're the leader of the Politburo. You're a propaganda man, but that's okay because it's propaganda that we can support. So antiwar.com. I know that we're both big fans of Justin Raimondo, who is fighting the good fight right now. So give us a quick overview of antiwar.com.
Sure. Well, it's the most important website in existence and has been for 23 years now, since 1995. And Eric Garris is the real god brain behind the thing, running it all. And then, of course, Angela Keaton helps keep the whole organization up and running as executive director. And she's really great. Jason Ditz is news editor, and he writes like 10 different news stories a day, summarizing the most important news. And the missing context, like the Washington Post has a report. He goes, well, here's what you need to know about it that's important. Here's what they're obviously lying by omission about, or whatever it is. And he makes that all real clear for you at news.antiwar.com. It's just heroic work. It's just the best stuff. He writes like 10 articles a day or something. It's insane. Great Jason Ditz. And then, as you said, Justin Raimondo, he's been there at antiwar.com since the very beginning. Really, I guess especially since the Kosovo War in 1999. And you mentioned fighting the good fight. He's actually got cancer right now, but I think it's okay for me to report to you that I don't know, like absolute latest indications from the doctor, but I know that overall he's doing much better. And that Keytruda medicine, you sometimes see it advertised on TV, this cancer treatment, It just so happens that his genetic code is perfectly suited, perfectly tailored for this drug to work. And apparently, it's having a real great effect in saving his life from lung cancer right now. So that's the date on that.
I want to mention real quick on Justin Raimondo that anybody who isn't already needs to follow him on Twitter because despite the
no, don't follow him on Twitter.
Yes,
get articles.
No,
whatever you do, don't follow him.
No, you got to follow him on Twitter because despite the side effects and the illness that he's dealing with, that has not stopped him for a minute from calling everybody a warmonger. I love it. I try to message him.
Except Trump, the actual commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He's great.
Yeah, I know. He's a softie on Trump, but I love pulling up my Twitter to look at, my little what have I missed lately section, and there's going to be at least 7 or 8 tweets from Justin Raimondo every single day, retweeting someone with what an effing warmonger. So I laugh every single time I say it. I know that if I were on this show right now and I said that, if I said for 5 seconds, sometimes he would already have cut me off and called me a warmonger. I love it. So I appreciate what he does. Now
he's mostly right about that stuff too.
Well, that's the thing is that I'm going to err on the side of his opinion just because he's almost always right when he's calling out the warmongers. So I want to get you out of here with kind of a quick little lightning round of a few questions that have been handed to me by some of our friends. So number 1, top 3 countries that you think pose the biggest threat to world peace.
USA, Israel, Saudi Arabia.
Ooh, wow. There you go. I kind of expected that, and you didn't hesitate for a second. Notice for people at home.
Not much question about it. I mean, you could throw in England.
Notice for people at home, Iran and North Korea didn't make that list.
Sadly.
They just didn't.
Honestly, I forgot what it was you said earlier, that one of the things I was going to take off from what you said was about how, the real conclusion is it doesn't have to be this way at all. Right? At the end of the Cold War, if Ron Paul had won in 1988 and he'd been there when the Soviet Union dissolved, he could have abolished NATO, brought the empire home, told the whole Pentagon, sorry, I have private security, you can't kill me, you're all fired, go home. We're going to abolish the Department of Defense, we're going to go back to the office of the Department of War in the old executive office building or whatever. We're going to be a limited republic at peaceful time, and I don't give a damn about Korea or Iran or whatever. They don't threaten us, they're not going to, and so who cares? And honestly, I think we could have peaceful relations with every country on earth. The thing I really encourage people, I know Americans are horrible at geography, and me too, what the hell? But take a globe and take a good look at it. There are no enemy states anywhere in the world. There's nobody who threatens us. All of Europe are our allies. The Russians and the Chinese, at worst, are our friends and rivals. They're certainly not our enemies. Right. The Indians are our friends, the Pakistanis. There is no power in Africa. There's no power in Latin America other than maybe Brazil. They don't have a military force whatsoever. Yeah. No foreign designs. That's it. You already ran out of Earth, right? Australia, that's part of the American Commonwealth. That's it. There are no continents. There are no threats to the American people. We need to have a national security state at all.
Right.
We could just quit. This whole thing's stupid.
All right. I got 2 more. This one comes from Michael Clark, who we actually had on episode 9. So, hey, Mike. So he wanted to ask you, everybody asks Scott about the Middle East. So give us really quick, what's something that the U.S. government might be doing closer to home that you think is worth mentioning?
Well, I really am guilty of doing a terrible job covering the drug wars down in Mexico. Mm-hmm. But it was really, it wasn't Fox. It was the guy after Fox, right? Who with George Bush's cooperation, launched this massive military assault on the drug cartels, and all that did was just escalate the violence beyond any reason, and escalate the power of black market cartels. Any libertarian at all, or any person who understands this place thing about economic pressures and incentives can explain why making markets blacker and blacker, so to speak, only means that you empower the more and more criminal and the people with the very shortest time preferences, the people who are willing to, cut off a lot of people's heads in order to make the point that this is their territory where they transport drugs through or whatever it is. And so we've seen the rise of just absolute butchers and terrorists and murders among drug cartels of Mexico. It's all directly because of the USA's drug war really there. And of course, then, just like always, we've seen the CIA double dealing, and they've been in there allied with the Sinaloa cartel as long as they fight the Zetas. That's what all that gun walking was about. Oh, you guys can sell your cocaine to Americans. We'll still prosecute Americans for consuming it, put them in prison, tear their families apart, destroy their businesses and their lives. But you go ahead and sell cocaine to the Americans, sell whatever you want to the Americans, as long as you fight the Zetas for us, and that kind of thing. It's absolutely sick, and it's totally my fault that I barely covered that story at all over these years. But it's a huge one, and tens of thousands of people have been, tens of thousands of people.
This has been a cheery episode, hasn't it?
Yeah, happy.
All right.
You asked.
Yeah, no, I know. All right, last one. Can individual activism, I mean, on a person-to-person basis, can individual activism help when it comes to matters of foreign policy? And if so, where do you think people should direct their efforts?
Well, that's a great question. I think, and I think, the problem is I spend all these time mired in the details because I got to always be able to prove my case no matter what. But I think what's most important, and I hate to admit that this is true, but I guess it is true with everyone, including myself, is that, a lot of what counts as true is what people's impression of, what they think everybody else thinks and this kind of thing, And so I think if people have the impression that if you love America at all, then you love soldiers and whatever they do, and you never question a president as long as it's a question of foreign policy, as you brought up before, and this kind of thing. And if you have the idea that that's the case, and then the only people you ever see opposing war is somebody who's like, Sean Penn, some millionaire communist blowhard who obviously doesn't know anything, and why would we listen to him? You mean the guy from Fast to Rich on High, blah, 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 and you get to ignore him. Then in that frame of reference, there's a South Park about Iraq. It's the whole fight is not about Saddam Hussein or weapons or Al-Qaeda or threats to America, whether it's okay to ever start war or any of this. The whole conflict in South Park was country or rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And if you like country, you like Bush, you like the war, you like torture, you like whatever. It's rock and roll, and you listen to NPR and you sit on your high horse and you're liberal and you're against it. But it's all just basically whose side are you on? Who do you feel like? And so then I think the way to disrupt that is, to emphasize work people like Ron Paul. As you said, look at how much progress Ron made simply by being an old white conservative Republican Christian Texan, square, married to his wife, that's been his same girlfriend since they were 16 years old in high school, sweetheart thing, and no scandals, right? He's a doctor, not a lawyer. He's this kindly old gentleman, but he's a Air Force veteran, was conscripted, but was a medic in the Air Force during the Vietnam era. And just his presence, what he says is, if you like your identity, you can keep it. You don't have to be Michael Moore. You don't have to like Michael Moore to be anti-war. You could be Ron Paul and be 10 times as anti-war as Hillary Clinton supporter and Barack Obama supporter Michael Moore. No question about that, right? And then, so he did that, and look what happened when he ran. Both times in 08 and in 12. He got more campaign donations from active duty and veterans, either way you slice it, active duty, enlisted, and officers than every other candidate in both parties combined. And that includes when Barack Obama was running as a pseudo anti-war candidate and was, the great hope of change and all this crap that people bought in 2008. But the military men said, here's a guy who actually cares about me. While these guys hide behind me, this is a guy who actually is trying to save my life. And so they were confused when it came down to it. And so then to get to the question, so then your role then should be to attack the right from the right. And so to set an example that you don't have to be a liberal. And look, there are a lot of great leftists on war. I'm not knocking them. But I'm just saying, if you're trying to end the war, then you got to appeal to great American right. And they're the ones who are the bedrock support for military interventionism. And they've got to be, if you attack it as being the policeman of the world, they like that. You call it an empire, they start crying. I don't know. Figure it out. But that's the deal. Bring your combat veteran friend with you when you say your anti-war stuff, and let him say, no, this is right, listen. And whatever it takes, right? Follow that Ron Paul model. And I don't do a very good job of practicing what I preach. I'm no kind of right-winger and that kind of thing. But I'm no kind of leftist either. And if I'm dealing with right wingers, I can constantly and always make right wing arguments against war. What about family values? All the disruption to the American family, all the divorces, all the cheating, all the foster kids, all the PTSD and abuse and all this horrible stuff. You can't close your eyes to that. That's a serious part of this. Conservatives hate that. What about the budget? What about sound money? How the hell are we ever supposed to have sound money in this country and end the boom and bust cycle that's caused by inflationary money as long as we have a world empire? We just can't. We have to knock this off. And so if you attack the right from the right, I think that's the greatest way to make headway against.
Yeah. Well, peace is a powerful message, and I can tell people where they can direct their efforts. They can go to scotthorton.org to check out the Scott Horton Show. They can pick up Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, which I have. So, I'll be the first one to admit everybody could always be more well-read, and I enjoyed the book immensely. They need to go and support libertarianinstitute.org. There's a support link right there, ladies and gentlemen. I promise you that they'll take whatever you got. And as Scott said, the most important website on the internet, antiwar.com. Scott, man, it's been such a pleasure to have you. I appreciate you coming on so much. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and I've just recently got into the talk show podcast game, and it has allowed me to meet awesome people like you and other fantastic guys in the liberty movement. So I absolutely cannot thank you enough for being here.
Yeah.
Sure thing. Happy to do it. That is the best part of hosting the show, right?
Oh, yeah. I'd actually said to Blake right before we came on is that, we're fiddling around. We had a little technical difficulties. We're fiddling around with Skype. And I said, Blake, look at this awesome little friends list I'm developing over here on my Skype. Like, there's people on here that are just absolute, just mega bombs in the liberty movement that I always have appreciated and didn't get a chance to know. Yeah. So, Blake, how are you feeling, buddy? I know that there were some moments in there that you were just,
My mind is blown. I mean, Scott, I don't know if you know what my shtick is, but I'm a conservative, and we call it. I guess we always refer to me as a recovering conservative. I'm learning about all this, and so it's a lot for me to take in, because I could have been considered a warmonger, but now I don't see things the way I used to see them. And I'm learning a lot from guys like you, and hey, really, it's life changing. And I think that the more people listen to reason and logic and intelligent people like you, the more we begin to realize, it's all hype. And really, we need to just care about each other and care about the world.
Yep. Peace is if you're pro-life and you're pro-peace, you just can't, you cannot be for the empire. You just can't.
And I've never really I never as an American ever thought of me being in the empire, but I am, and I don't like it. I don't.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, subscribe to us on YouTube. We got to get those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers. We got to get those numbers up. So subscribe to us on
Please
YouTube, Facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley, Twitter @Alan M. Mosley, our website, thegoldstandardpodcast.com. Scott, thank you so much for being here. And hopefully everybody is going to be able to digest this and then tune into us next week.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you both very much again for having me. I really do appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Scott. All right. Call another one. See y'all in episode 15.